Today, I'm so delighted to be able to talk to a really gifted, talented musician, the great Charlie Albright, hailed as among the most gifted musicians of his generation with a dazzling natural keyboard affinity, who made quite an impression by the Washington Post. American pianist, composer, improviser Charlie Albright has been praised for his, quoted by the New York Times, jaw-dropping technique and virtuosity meshed with a distinctive musicality. An amazing career, and he's really rising. He won the Ruhr Clavier Festival Young Artist Award presented by Mark-André Hamelin. He's collaborated with such huge names like Yo-Yo Ma, Joshua Bell, Bobby McFerrin. Charlie, great to have you on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Nikhil.
I want to touch a little bit on the past, and I want to ask you, basically, did you go to the piano yourself? Did your parents ask you to take lessons? Was it something that you naturally wanted to do from the beginning?
Well, yeah, so I don't really remember it, to be honest, because I was 3.5, and so the story goes, neither of my parents played the piano. I'm half Korean. My dad is from Ohio. My mom's from Korea. And, in my mom's generation, everyone played a little bit of either piano or violin when they're growing up. So she played just enough that we had a very, very old kind of clunker junker upright garage sale piano, like in our living room. I mean, it was half the keys were probably missing. It was one of those type deals. And I guess what happened was my mom was in the kitchen one day, and I was about 3.5, and climbed up on the bench, and I guess I started pecking out Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, the melody to it, by ear. And so my mom said that, she came out and said, who taught you that? And I said something like nobody or no one. And so she saw that I kind of had a knack for the piano. And so she taught me what she learned for a few months at the piano, all by ear. And then I went to this little old lady who lived a block away, she played the accordion, the organ, and a little bit of piano. And so she taught me all these songs like, the Beer Barrel Polka and things like that when I was 4. And then it kind of just went from there. But yeah, my parents,
hold on a second.
Of them,
so Charlie, let me jump in here. Do you
Sure.
have perfect pitch?
I do.
So are you good with your memory? You can hear something and you can play it back?
I can. If I hear something and I know it well enough that I could sing it to you or hum it to you, then I can play it on the piano and improvise around it and stuff like that. If I don't, I might have to hear it a few times just to be able to get the tune in my head. But if I can get to the point where I can sing it, then I can play it.
Did you play piano for pleasure as a kid growing up? Was it something you just played on your own, nobody needed to tell you, or did your mom ask you to practice?
So my mom was probably the opposite of, I remember a few years ago they were talking about like helicopter moms
Exactly.
and things like that, or tiger moms, that kind of thing. She's probably the complete opposite of that. Like my parents growing up, I was very lucky. My parents growing up, they were always like, do your best, whatever it is that you do. You know what I mean? Whatever that is. And I remember growing up a few times, we all hate practicing sometimes. I still do sometimes. I hate piano. I want to quit, things like that. And, I remember my mom saying, that's fine. You don't have to play. You should do something else then. You're not going to just sit and play video games all day, but, you don't have to do piano. And maybe it was reverse psychology. I don't know. But anyway, I always found myself drawn back.
Okay, so that's very good. You had a very relaxed environment. Now, your teacher, you mentioned that lady across the street. How long was that training? And I assume she taught you how to read, and she taught you other things. So you had a developed ear. Did she have to train your ear, or was that something you naturally had on your own?
Well, what would happen is she actually did not teach me how to read. I didn't learn how to start reading music until I met my first classical teacher, my first real teacher that I had for about 12 years, Nancy Adsit, when I was about 7 or so. And so that neighborhood teacher and a few other teachers would all teach me completely by ear. So they'd play something and I'd play it back and we'd play together like a duet. One of my very influential teachers, shortly after working with the older lady down the street, was a lady named Joanne who owned a piano and organ store at this really old kind of swap meet type mall place that they had in my town. I grew up in a small town called Centralia, Washington, in about an hour and a half south of Seattle. And she would teach me. My dad would take me in. My parents would take me in sometimes, and she'd play me a piece, and I'd play it back. And one of us would be on the organ, and the other would be on the piano, and then we'd switch in the middle of the songs and run to the other instrument and play that. It was a lot of fun, and so that was a huge part of my development.
Wait,
so
how
I had
did
several
you?
teachers that
So
taught
you learned how to play the organ as well?
Yeah, anything with keys, basically, I'd play. Organ, keyboard,
Okay.
the accompaniments you can do with those things. It's a lot of fun.
Now, you said you began the formal training around 1996 with Nancy Adsit. Is that when you started to compose and improvise? When did you actually start to do those particular creative arts?
It's hard to nail down a time exactly because it was so intertwined. So like even when we were playing pieces by ear, a lot of it would be, you'd be making things up and it wouldn't be anything that was written down. Nothing was concrete. You kind of go with the flow. And so it's hard for me to find a time where, I just started, improvising because I think it was always kind of underlying as part of what I had been doing since I touched the piano to begin with.
Did you know what you were doing theoretically, or were you just going purely by what sounded good, and you were kind of mimicking and imitating models, songs that you liked and you enjoyed? I think
it's that. I wasn't. It was definitely not a theoretical. Oh, I'm gonna have to go to a 4 chord and then a 5 chord and then a minor 3. It was none of that at all. It's like, well, what works, right? And what sounds good. And if it doesn't sound good, then you don't do that so much. And if it does, then you do more of that, right? And I think even to this day, like when I improvise, maybe in the classical style or whatever, or romantic style or whatever, it's not about, what chords I'm going to or what form I'm going to take. It's almost like you have a big box of Legos, and that's kind of how I think of improvising for me, at least. Like it's like I have a big box of Legos, and they're all different sizes and all different colors, and you can. Let's say you want to build a spaceship, right? You can put them together in all kinds of different ways to build a spaceship, but you don't necessarily take a pair of scissors or a knife out and start cutting the Legos into different pieces or painting them different colors. You use little building blocks, and you can use that to make something bigger, right? So it was kind of like that.
And now, just to get a sense of the kind of music that you listened to in your house when you're growing up, I assume it was pretty eclectic, right? Because you're known as a classical pianist, but you really collaborate in many different styles. I mean, you can play in pretty much all settings.
Yeah, it's we listened to a whole bunch of stuff, and I still do. So I remember growing up, we'd always have like the classical radio station. So in this area, it's King FM, they call it, and it was on like 24 hours a day, super low. So like in the middle of the night, in my room, I'd have the radio on like, level 4 out of, it was really low. You could barely hear it, but it would just be on, and it was comforting for me. But at the same time, we'd listen to a ton of jazz. We'd listen to literally everything. I grew up with K-pop. I loved K-pop before it was like popular. I was like, I'm that guy now. I remember when it wasn't cool. Yeah.
Wait, so that's really interesting. So you actually listen to many different styles. Can you name?
Oh, absolutely.
Could you name a couple of things that really were influential to you, like a couple of albums that are very special to you, or artists?
Absolutely. So when I was growing up, when I was young, like a young kid, before I was really, introduced to classical music and stuff, one of my favorite albums was Yanni Live at the Acropolis. If you remember that on PBS, it was, I loved Yanni's music because it blended all these acoustic stuff with kind of pop but contemporary. I thought it was really, really cool, and I still listen to him sometimes. And then growing up, of course, Korean pop was big. And back when I was younger, it was like HOT, the group, and there was a few others. I don't know. And, so I grew up with that side, maybe connect with my Korean half. I don't know. And I always really loved movie music. So like Disney songs, right? So I grew up in the era of like, Aladdin and the Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid, the animated films. And the music in those things are so amazing, right? So I'd play a ton of that, and it was just all over the place, my tastes.
Let's continue on into your training. So then you started classical training. Was it a bit of a shock for you to start having to read a lot, coming from such a strong ear background?
I don't remember it being so bad, but I think I'm sure it was hard for my teacher. So I was taken from several teachers by playing by ear, basically. And for a while, I was taking from this jazz teacher in Olympia, Washington. And he's told, after studying with him for 6 months or a year or something, he told my parents, Charlie needs a year of classical training to develop his technique. And then he can come back to the what I call fun songs, right? Jazz and pop and all that, And so that was the original plan. So he introduced us to Nancy Adsit, who is like my grandmother. I mean, she's completely family, So the plan was to work with her for a year and leave, or go back to the fun stuff, right? Because she was a very, very classically trained classical teacher, and you play what's written down, and so she started me on reading music, and I think it must have been a crazy challenge for her to get this little 7 or 8 year old kid to sit down and stop playing whatever he wants and start playing what was written, But she taught it.
What pieces would she assign to you? Would she give you technical exercises? What would she do to build your technique?
Sure. So I remember for a short while I did like Czerny and things like that. I did I didn't necessarily like a lot of it. I remember I played this one piece, this one really slow piece or something. And my dad and I used to joke around, it sounds like a slow heart attack. It's such a slow, boring, classical piece of music. That was the term we used. This is like a slow heart attack. But, we'd eventually, move away from, we didn't spend a tremendous time on scales and stuff. We did some, Handel, Czerny, that kind of thing. But she's quickly started teaching me, within a few years, I started doing the Chopin Etudes, which are, exercises technically, but they're also gorgeous pieces of music. So that made the technique less, gruesome, I guess, more bearable.
Did that start to, because you come from an ear background, did he shape your ideas of how melodic ideas and harmonic devices, did that start to influence you creatively as well, being exposed to that and playing that?
I think it must have, but probably subconsciously. I think I was too young to really realize that, I'm taking influences from Chopin or, Rachmaninoff or whatever. I think, at that point, let's just play the piano. But I think so, because, now when I improvise, Chopin was one of the best composers for the piano. He almost exclusively composed for the piano. That was his main thing. Unlike some other, composers that made great piano music, but they also did stuff for all instruments, right? Chopin was really a piano person. And I think it, when I listen to some of the stuff I come up with or play, I can kind of hear sometimes those sounds, because I think he knew how to really, use the piano to a very unique kind of level, you know what I mean? Because that's what he did. You
played organ, so do you have a background in figured bass, third bass, or any of those theoretical things, or do you not really think about that kind of stuff?
Oh my goodness, I didn't know what figured bass was until I went to college. I intuitively knew what it was, but I didn't know what it was in terms of, what it was called and, all those types of things. So my Mrs. Adsit taught me theory. I had to do theory. I hated it. Absolutely hated it. Hated theory. And, and then later on I had to do, more theory in college and conservatory and stuff. But yeah, I didn't know. I remember when I took one of my entrance tests when I was applying for colleges and stuff, I didn't know all that much about what it was called, but I could do a lot of it. You know what I mean? So that was good.
Yeah. I feel maybe some of the theory is a bit overblown sometimes. It can kind of sets people down the wrong way. And so I feel like sometimes it's just...
Oh my goodness. Don't get me started on theory. I think with theory for me, I think it's an important thing to learn through maybe an intermediate level. You know what I mean? You need to know scales, and you need to know key signatures, and you need to know, some basic chord progressions. That's great. But once you get to higher and higher and higher level analysis and stuff, all of the rules seem to kind of just fall apart. And I have a theory. I have a theory, but I have a theory as to why that's the case. And I think it's because, music has always been music, right? Like way before anything was ever written down, like before notes were a thing, people would sing and play instruments and stuff, and then people would hear it and they'd play it and they'd pass it to their children. And that's how it kind of passed down through generations. And, theory was kind of an invention to kind of explain music in a way, right? Like we invented theory to kind of make music more into an analytical science, if you will, whereas it's not really a science at all. So, you know what I mean? Music is itself, and theory is there to try to explain what's happening. And I think once you get to super high levels, it often can't do that.
Yeah, for you, the sound comes first, and so much the analysis comes later. Would it be fair to say that?
I think so. I think so, yes.
Let me ask you this. Back when you had more spare time, did you experiment harmonically with music? Is that something you would sit down and try and play around and just organically and just mess around with it?
I don't know if I sat down with the explicit purpose of doing that, but I think that, sometimes you'll get in the moods like, oh, I feel like playing something, and you're making something. So you'll sit down, you'll just play, by yourself or whatever, and you'll just, sometimes you'll experiment with something. And it kind of goes back to what I briefly touched on, that, for me, it's, if it's good, then I'll try to remember it, and then you can use it more and more in the future and incorporate into other future ones. And if it's bad, it sounds like, if it sounds like crap, then you just, throw it out. And I think also that you hear things from other composers in across all genres. Sometimes I'll hear something awesome by like Hans Zimmer. Oh, it'd be great to meet Hans Zimmer. I love his music. Like you hear something great, and it's like, oh wow, that's really awesome. And then you can kind of like, what did he do? Oh, he kind of did this, and then you can maybe put that in your toolbox that you can incorporate into other pieces, or
right.
Whether it's
so do you do that? Do you take ideas from pieces that you play and say, I like that, I might use that in one of my improvisations? Is that something that you would do? Like, do you take licks, so to speak?
I think subconsciously. I must, because, like as we were talking about earlier, Chopin influence, and some of the sounds that I come up with now are very kind of reminiscent of Chopin, or very reminiscent of Rachmaninov or something like that.
So you're saying subconsciously, it just happens. You think you have such a memory that from something you've played, you can recreate it in the moment.
I think so.
Can you think of a specific instance where that's happened? So like maybe you take a piece by Rachmaninoff or Chopin, or there's some movement that you enjoyed that you might have cropped. Let's
see. I don't know if there's any specific one, but like, for example, one time as a kind of a gag, I did recorded myself doing, a never-ending Rachmaninoff improvisation, and it was a long time ago. I just thought it was funny because I noticed that, like, in Rachmaninoff's music, a lot of time, he has big chords and they're all fancy and there's like 15 notes in each of them. But, a lot of times his melodies and his things don't like to necessarily resolve very quickly. Like, you'll think it's almost, his melody's almost done, he's going to go back to the main key again, but then he just swoops up and just keeps going even higher and higher and higher. So I did that as an exaggeration. And it was kind of funny. It was funny to me, at least, because like I would just go and just take what he did and just push it to the extreme. Like it never resolves. It's like in Korean you say it's taptape. It's like, it's what's the word? It's like it makes you anxious because you just want the thing to like,
Well, that's so interesting that you are able. Can you kind of imitate composers' sounds, and you can say, okay, let's do a little bit of Mozart, and then you think of certain elements that way, in a way that that's kind of a fun kind of pastiche of a composer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can. Composers oftentimes have a sound, right? What's Hans Zimmer's sound? It's big, huge, epic, music. Like, it's not all like that, but a lot of it is, right? What's Mozart's sound? Well, he has lots of little scales that run up and down and little broken arpeggiated chords and, things like that. What's Chopin's sound? Well, he has all these 5/7 chords and he does all kinds of like runs and, Rachmaninoff, the melodies never end. It never resolves, or it does, but it takes a long time, I think you can totally do that. It's a lot of fun to do.
Okay, let's talk about your training then. So you graduated with a BA from Harvard, and then you went to do your master's in New England Conservatory. What training at those institutions, can you talk about how it influenced you and what you got out of the training that you received?
Absolutely. So that was those were part of a joint program that I did. So it was really cool. Here in the US they started it. I guess now it must have been probably 20 years ago now or something in some schools, where they'll team up an academic school with a music school, and often they'll offer some kind of a dual degree program. So, for example, Harvard's was you can get a bachelor's degree in anything you want. At the same time, you can get a master's degree in music from the New England Conservatory. So. And also the cool thing about it is that it's faster than normal. So usually it would take 4 years for your bachelor's and then another 2 years for the master's. But during your first 4 years at Harvard, you're full-time there, but you're also doing your first year equivalent of your master's degree at the conservatory. So then you graduate after 4 years, and then you have one more year at the conservatory only, which is technically year 2 of that. So it saves a year, which is nice. And the neat thing is the whole time you're taking piano lessons for me, or whatever instrument you're taking at the conservatory. And I had a phenomenal, amazing teacher, Pyan, at New England Conservatory. And, she was amazing. Mrs. Atzett was amazing too. And she brought me all the way up, to time to go to college. And, I met Miss Pyan there, and it was
that
fantastic.
Charlie, was that teacher polishing your technique, or what did she do that developed you?
I mean, a little bit of everything, I think, or a lot of everything. She, I think in music, oftentimes like having a different perspective can be really, really good. Whether that's even just going to have an occasional lesson with another teacher, going to a master lesson or something. Sometimes two people can even say the exact same thing in different ways, and one other way might click a little bit better or might make you think about something a little better, even though the two teachers are trying to get at the same thing in different ways. You know what I mean? And so when I went to conservatory, we worked on everything from, musicality to technique, and really polishing that up, and interpretation, and, the whole shebang.
Classical improvisation is not common. I would go as far to say it doesn't happen. Well, how did your colleagues and peers react to you changing notes, coming up with stuff? Can you talk about your teachers' reactions, your peers' reactions, and now your colleagues' reactions?
Oh, man. That's a good question. So during my 4 years at Harvard, I was living full time in the dorms there, and so I had the neat thing about you kind of asked a bit earlier what I thought of the program and stuff. One of the great things about programs like that, I think, is that you can keep doing the music, but you can also be exposed to so much other things and so many other people that have completely different passions from you. You know what I mean? So, I'd have dinner with people who were physics majors and people who were probably going to be the next president, that kind of a thing. And they were really passionate about their individual things. And so for me, I was kind of like I was the guy who played the piano, that was kind of my passion, so I think everyone there really respected each other and their own, passions, I guess, and their own interests. And I think everyone was really supportive of each other. Absolutely.
You had a positive reaction. That's great. So since you've been trained both to really interpret a score very well and also to improvise, how much time do you spend on each element of it? So how much time do you devote to perfecting a piece of music versus working on your improvisation? Because you do both in a concert.
Yes. In terms of daily practice time, it's heavily skewed to working on the polishing and interpreting and stuff other people's works. The great thing about improv is that, while you're doing it, well, the great thing and the hard thing, I guess, is that, there's no takebacks, right? It's not an essay you write down that you can, go over a few times and work out the kinks. So regardless of what you practice at home, it's not going to be exactly the same there, and it shouldn't be, So basically at home, it's when you're playing around, it's basically just adding to that toolbox, because ultimately you might practice a spaceship at home, but you might want to build a house on your concert. You know what I mean? So it's not going to be directly translational. I think a lot of it's about learning about the different, little Lego pieces, if you will, and just figuring out different new ways that work that you can put them together.
Now, you said you hated theory as a kid, but you probably had to do some of it in school as well, right? When you went to conservatory. Yes. So did you still have a similar feeling for it, or did you did you like it, or was it still the same?
Did I like it? You want an honest answer?
Yeah, please.
I didn't really
truth.
like it all that much. I did it because I had to, but I didn't really like it. I was like, let's just get this out of the way. Just get it over with.
Did you feel it applied much to the way you improvise or compose? Did it assist you? Because I do want to ask you about how you compose. So did it influence you in any positive way, negative way? How did that harmony and that counterpoint, and how did that really have any effect on you, basically?
It probably did, but probably more subconsciously again. When I improvise and stuff, I don't really think about, too much about the chords and things like that. Sometimes I might have picked up certain things that work well. It's like, oh, let's, like contrary motion in theory, right? Like, the top's going up and the bottom's going down. I do that sometimes maybe when I improvise. And where did I get that? Maybe it was from a theory class at some point. I don't know. You know what I mean? But, it works, right? But, like, oh, no parallel octaves, well, screw that. I'm going to do parallel octaves if it sounds good and I want to. My piece.
Now, you're a composer. So when did you start seriously composing?
Well, I do the main part of what I do is improvising, and I'll try to make an improvisation sound as close to a polished piece as possible. And because I suck at like typing in Sibelius and whatever, I just don't have time. I'm bad at it. I'm slow at it. So what happens is when I have a really good piece that I think that people might like, there's someone I know who I send like a recording to, and then she'll transcribe it down for me, and then I can, because I am just bad at typing in notes one at a time.
You've worked with really some of the biggest names in music. For instance, Yo-Yo Ma, you're a frequent collaborator with Yo-Yo Ma. Can you talk about the first time you worked with him? It says that you worked with him for the very first time. I think it was 2008. Was that right? In December 1st? You're presenting when you're at a Harvard ceremony. Can you talk about that experience and how that launched off your relationship with him?
Oh man. So I remember one morning I was in my dorm, and my roommates were next door there, and I woke up and I checked my email and getting the day started, and I got an email from the director of the Office of the Arts at Harvard. And I don't think I had met him before at that point. And anyways, the email was, Charlie, there's going to be Harvard's going to be giving this honorary doctorate degree to Ted Kennedy. And this was like only the third time, I think, in history that Harvard had a special ceremony to give an honorary degree. And I think the reason was because he was in poor health. Usually they're given at graduation time. And he said, we're going to have this, there's going to be this ceremony. And I'd like to know if you'd be willing and able to play with Yo-Yo Ma for this ceremony. And, my jaw just kind of dropped on the floor. I'm like, right. What? I was like, so obviously the answer is yes. And so, it happened. And
that's right when you're in college, right? Or were you doing your master's, or were you an undergraduate at that time?
I was an undergraduate still. And I was just mind blown. And so we played, I think we played a Gershwin or two Gershwin preludes or something, and then like the theme from the Gabriel's Oboe by Morricone.
Did you have a rehearsal? And if so, what was that like, and how was it meeting him?
So I think that first time, one of the rehearsals, and I think it might have been the first time I met him, was at his house. And so one of the people that worked in his office picked me up and drove me to his home. And, I was probably shaking. I don't know if I was, but, I was nervous inside. And but Yo-Yo Ma is the most like warm, welcoming, kind-hearted person ever. And so he immediately made, you feel welcome. And, like when you're playing with him, it's just like this dialogue between the instruments. You know what I mean? Like he plays off of you and you play off of him, and it's surreal. It's amazing.
Did he know at that time that you could improvise or compose? Did he learn that later as your star started to rise?
I don't know if he knew it at the first time we played, because we were playing stuff that was written down. I think I was improvising a bit on the Morricone. I was adding notes and stuff than was written on that page, just because I thought it sounded better.
Yeah.
And the melody of that piece is just, absolutely gorgeous. It's something else. And we're playing in a very big hall, and the piece I think originally was not composed for piano and cello. It was
transcription.
I think so. I think it's for orchestra, actually, for the accompaniment, basically. So I decided, I tried to make it sound more like that.
You probably received the score. Did you think to yourself, I want to change a couple of things here?
I don't know if I thought that or what, or if I kind of started doing that during like rehearsing or something. But yeah. It's just little things, like how many, where the notes are, maybe how many notes you put in a chord or something, like just to make it sound richer. Because again, I think it was a transcription anyway. It wasn't the original by the composer. So I thought, well, I can, maybe I can make it sound more like the original.
Right. Now, can you share a Yo-Yo Ma anecdote of your time working with him? Anything interesting? And I'm so curious what he thinks of your musicianship.
It's like he has a way of just making everything sound. He's such a genuine person, right? That what he says, even when he's making a suggestion or something, it's so complimentary. He's just great. I remember minutes before we were about to walk on stage. I think I had just met Ted Kennedy backstage, and we were about to walk out. I think this was Joe Biden was there, and it was right before he became vice president. And I got to meet him afterward. That was cool. We were about to walk on stage, and we were like joking. We were just joking and shooting the breeze about like iPhones or something, or what new features should be on. It's just like, and then we walk out and play on. It's a blast.
I want to ask you, concert pianists have an incredible pressure. They have to memorize so much. They have to play so much. And then the critics, they have to worry about wrong notes, interpretation, tempo. And you can never satisfy critics sometimes, it almost appears. But do you get nervous when you play, or you just don't care? And what do you think about, does it ever, because I read a Horowitz biography, and the guy, they had to push him onto stage, and he was one of the greatest pianists of all time. What is your personality type? What's your temperament? Yeah, I'd just like to know about that.
Well, I mean, to say that I never get nervous is untrue. There are times when I get nervous, and it depends. There's, overall, I think I'm getting better about not getting nervous, and sometimes it happens though. If you're giving a big concert, if you're giving a really big concert somewhere you've never played, or some big venue that you've never played, or even a big venue that you have played, you sometimes get nervous, and you're scared of critics, But you're absolutely right. You can't. I've kind of realized. I'm still trying to realize, but I'm realizing more and more. You can't please everyone with your music, and I think if you do, it's almost like you. Even if you don't offend someone with the way you play, or everyone is like, okay, that's fine, maybe you haven't said something worth saying through it. Maybe you haven't, and so when obviously you want to get great reviews. That's who doesn't want to hear nice things about themselves, right? but at this point I try to be like, well, you know what, no matter how. Let me give you a fun example. One time I was at a competition. I can't remember where it was, but it was some international competition. And this is kind of the time where one time at least I attribute to kind of being the point at which I said, you know what, I'm going to do things the way I want to do it. I performed in a competition. I was playing the Chopin Etudes Opus 25 or something. And I was eliminated after this one round. And so afterwards, you get to talk to the judges. And one judge, a few minutes after, or later in the day, or whatever it was, they said, Charlie, the Winter Wind Etude, number 11, right? it was somebody, they go, Charlie, you have to remember that the Winter Wind Etude, it's a military march and it ought to be played that way. They're like, it has to be like a military march. It has to be, very militaristic sounding. And I was like, okay, or something along those lines. So I said, okay. A few minutes later, another judge, same performance he's talking about, he independently came up, he talked about that same piece, the same number 11. And he goes, Charlie, it's not a military march. It ought not be played that way. You
goodness.
shouldn't. And that was within a few minutes of it. And it was, I remember thinking to myself, well, you know what? You can't please everyone. So I'm going to do it the way I think it should be done. If people like it, great. I hope they do. If they don't, well, you know what? They can do it their own way then. So I think you try to be. So after that, that's kind of the point I attribute it to. I kind of decide that, I want to play things the way I think it should be played. Because no matter how you do it, there are going to be people that like it and there are going to be people who don't. And so at least this way, I can hopefully be convincing. And, maybe then even people who say, well, I don't think it should be done that way, they might say, even though that's the case, I still found his interpretation to be convincing, even though I don't personally agree with it.
Who are your, now you've been like at the 2014 at Clavier Festival Young Artist Scholarship, you were presented the award by Mark-André Hamelin, who is known as the quote unquote super virtuoso. What was that like? Did you get to talk to him and did he comment on your playing and do you have a relationship with him?
So he wasn't at the concert that I gave there, but here's the funny story. I was sitting in a restaurant with my now wife. She was my girlfriend at that point, and Stella. And we were sitting in I think it was a little Japanese restaurant in the neighborhood or something. We we're just going out to have something to eat, and I get a phone call from like this unknown number, and I answer it, and it's him calling from Australia. I'm like, wait, who is this? So he had chosen me for this award, but I don't think I was stunned and blown away. But I didn't actually meet him in person there for that award. But he chose me for the award quite randomly, I think. Or at least it wasn't like I applied for it, that is. So it was a random phone call, that is. And I was sitting there and I was like, wow. So that's how it happened.
Do you remember what he said? He must have said some things about explaining why he chose you, right?
I don't even remember. I think I was just so like stunned from, getting this random phone call. I after, like again, picking my job off the ground, I remember him saying something about this award and probably that someone would be contacting me about it. But he wanted to let me know that I won.
That's pretty cool. Now, you replaced at the Bergen International Festival. You, Lang canceled an appearance and you were at the last minute asked to perform. Is that right? At the Grieg Hall in Bergen, Norway?
That's right.
Now, that sounds pretty wild. So can you talk about that?
Oh, yeah. So that was in 2017. So that was 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago. So Long had an injury, so he had canceled a few of his performances around the world, and I got a call about them wanting me to come in and give a concert in his stead. And this was just, I think it was a few weeks before the concert date or something, and so I said, sure. I had, pieces that I can play, and it was a solo concert, so it's flexible in terms of what I can play. And so I went over there, and it was phenomenal. I think I gave like 5 or 6 encores, and they had like this giant poster of my face, like 3 stories high on the side of the hall. It was fun. And then I just came back actually again from Bergen. I gave 2 concerts a few weeks ago. And it's a beautiful place, and the people there love music. And
you returned, in fact, not too long ago, May this year,
yes.
And you and again with the encores, they loved it, and you have a connection with Bergen, no doubt. Now let's talk about Grieg then. Does that resonate with you? That style, his style of music, his compositions.
Oh, I love Grieg. I think his concerto was like the second one I ever learned. And so every year at the festival, they play it because he's from Bergen, Norway, or at least he's lived there a long time. And, they have a statue. They even have Grieg branded bottled water and Grieg chocolates. I mean, it's all over the place. And so every year at the festival, they play the Grieg concerto at Grieg Hall with the Bergen Phil. And this time I was asked to do the honors, so it was a lot of fun. So we went out there and
killed it.
Grieg.
Now let's talk about concertos, cadenzas. Now you improvise. Not many, I mean, classical pianists, typically they will memorize a great cadenza from another composer or from the written down composer. What's your stance on cadenzas?
Oh, let's see. So I oftentimes improvise cadenzas, not always, but very often. I think it's a lot of fun to do. It's a chance that you get to really just kind of do whatever you want. So I've improvised, cadenzas to Beethoven, to Grieg, to Vivian Fine. And it's different styles. And for me, what I like to do is you want the cadenza to kind of fit in with the rest of the piece, right? You're playing a 30-minute long piece most of the time, and your cadenza's maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes, at the end of the first movement or something. And you want it to be, or at least I want it to be, I want it to make sense in the grand scheme of the whole 30-minute piece, but also at the same time, I want to put my stamp on it, right? Because it's the cadenza is a solo part. It's a solo show-off part, if you will. And so I try to make that balance, I guess. All right, Charlie, take us through your mind then through a cadenza. The orchestra is setting you up, and so what happens in your mind? How do you structure it? Give an example. Take a Sure.
concerto that you play, and could you maybe perhaps walk through how you would kind of structure a cadenza and what's running through your mind at that moment?
Sure. So usually when I'm improvising a cadenza, beforehand to prepare, I'll figure out what themes from that movement I want to, or maybe other movements, I want to incorporate into the cadenza, right? Because you want it to kind of tie in with the rest of the piece that you just played. So I'll think, okay, he has, this main theme, and then he has this other theme, and then he has this other theme. So let's say there's 3 things that I want to incorporate. Then I'll just play around with different ways of linking them together and improvising around them, if you will. All at the same time while keeping in mind my time limit, if you will. You know what I mean? I can't sit there and just go off for 25 minutes by myself. That wouldn't be, you can't do that. So it's like, okay, I probably have maybe 5, 6, maybe 7 minutes, depending on the piece or so, give or take, that I can improvise. So I'll have those main themes in mind and then just go through it, seeing what works and what doesn't until I have kind of a general framework. Okay, I'm going to start with this theme, and I'm going to at some point go into this theme, and then at some point go with this theme, and then this is how I'm going to end so that the orchestra knows that they're supposed to come back in now, And it's different every single time, but I have that kind of general framework. Oh, and it has to be 5 minutes long, that kind of a thing.
Now, you did your main stage Carnegie Hall debut. You selected the Vivian Fine Concerto for Piano and Orchestra. Now, explain why you chose that, and explain how you prepared for it, and what was your plan for your debut.
So the American Symphony is headed by Maestro Leon Botstein, who is also the president of Bard College in upstate, or not upstate, but north of New York City. And so he actually, the American Symphony Orchestra actually contacted me, and they said, Charlie, we're playing this Vivian Fine concertante, which it's a piece that Vivian Fine is an American composer, and the piece is not really well known. It actually had never been performed in New York City before, and they asked me if I'd be able to play this, and I hadn't played the piece before, so I learned it specifically for this concert, and it's a gorgeous piece, and so we did it, and it was fun. I improvised the cadenza to that one.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's also interesting too, because you did an encore that was really fun. You did a Jerry Lee Lewis style encore, Great Balls of Fire. now you were hold on a second. You're in Carnegie Hall, and you're going out with a bang here.
We talked about being nervous earlier, right? Yeah. So I was actually really nervous. I was more nervous about that probably than the actual concert, because I thought, I've been playing this Great Balls of Fire since I was literally 4 or 5. It was one of the pieces that I think Joanne who owned the piano and organ store had taught me that when I was a kid. And I started, I've always played it my whole life. And a few years ago, I started doing it, as part of concerts sometimes. It's like an encore or something. I tell you, you've never seen so many screaming like 80-year-old women, I tell you. But so I thought, you know what? I could play like a classical encore. I could do, but everyone's done that. And what do I really want to play? I really want to play Great Balls of Fire. It might not have ever been played on the main stage of Carnegie before. So I was debating it. And I was thinking, do I need to ask permission first? And I thought, you know what? No, because it's easy to say no to something. What's the saying? It's easier to get forgiveness than permission or something like that. And backstage before I went on stage, I was upstairs next to my dressing room, and there was this guy there who worked for Carnegie. And we really hit it off. We were just kind of talking and stuff and talking about all kinds of. He said he hadn't worked there long. He said, and I told him my idea. I said, I'm thinking of playing Great Balls of Fire as an encore, but I'm really nervous because it's Carnegie Hall. I don't know if it's appropriate. Are they going to And he goes, do it. Just do it. And turns out on the elevator ride down when he was taking me to the stage, it turns out he's worked there for like decades, and he's seen like every big famous historical musician ever. He was lying about having only worked there a short time. And anyway, I did it, and it was great.
That's fantastic. This is the fun part of the interview, at least for me, because so I'm going to ask you hot seat questions, top 3 this, top 3 that. It's just for fun. You don't have to worry about what comes to mind immediately, okay? So I'm going to ask you, here we go. So I'm going to ask you top 3, let's start with jazz, top 3 jazz musicians.
Oh my goodness. I can't even name top 3. I love different, I can't even name top 3. Like I'll pick 5. I mean, that song, my wife listens to that song so much. It's on I can't even name top 3. Like I love, there is a jazz musician I don't think
3 names that come to mind then, right this minute.
Oh, shoot. I can't do it. I don't know. Can't pick 3. Love them all.
Okay, let's move on. So how about top 3 classical composers before 1900?
Top 3. Only classical or
yes.
any kind of classical?
Yeah.
Okay. Top 3. Beethoven, Chopin. Oh, shoot. Beethoven and Chopin are my favorites. Grieg? Maybe Grieg.
Great. Top 3 etudes.
Top 3 etudes. Opus 25, number 1, 7, and 12. So harp, cello, and ocean.
If you could improvise with anyone in history, if you could jam with anyone, it could be Mozart, it could be B.B. King, who would it be?
Oh, only one?
Yeah.
Why not top 3, Nicola? Come on. Top 3, everything else.
All right, no, I'll do top 3. Let's do top 3 then. For everyone.
How about Chopin?
Okay.
How about Liberace?
Okay.
How about Liszt?
Liszt. Okay. If you could ask, okay, let's take Chopin. If you saw him, if you could put him in a time machine and could meet him, what would you ask him? Would you have any questions for him?
Would I have any questions for him? I don't know if I'd have any questions. I'd just be dumbfounded. I'd just be like, hey, let's hang out. You're cool.
All right, top 3 composers after 1900. We're talking classical.
Menotti.
Okay.
Janáček. Kapustin.
Okay. And name me your proudest musical moment.
Oh, man. That's a tough one. My proudest musical moment. I don't know if I can name one. I've been really blessed to be able to do what I love. And there's been so many moments that I've been like, holy smokes, this is surreal. Like we talked earlier about the first time I got to play with Yo-Yo Ma. That was unbelievable. Earlier this year when I got to play at Carnegie Hall, I was just like, it was almost like a haze, like a dream. You know what I mean? It's like you don't even really realize what you're doing. You're going. It's like you're going and playing. Yeah, but you don't really. realize what's happening, you know.
That's actually pretty good.
Those are just those are just two of them. But there's really, I mean, honestly, I've been so blessed that there's a lot that I'm really thankful for that I've been able to experience. It's
Top 3 piano concertos.
Top 3 piano concertos, probably. Oh shoot, top 3, no particular order. I love Tchaikovsky, Grieg, Shostakovich too. I'm going to keep going. I love.
All right, give me 2 more, 5.
Okay. Rhapsody in Blue.
Okay.
Let's stick with 4. Let's do that.
Okay.
Those are probably my top 4 that I really, really like.
Top 3 small piano pieces, like really small, quick pieces.
I think, you know what's really fun to play is the Volodos transcription of the Turkish March. That's the Mozart Turkish March. That's a fun, quick encore thing. Schumann Liszt Widmung. That's a beautiful piece. And if we're not talking classical, I love doing things like, you know, I'm a Great Balls of Fire, of course. But like if you're talking about more, you know, Amazing Grace, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I love doing versions of those.
Do you know Volodos? Do you know many of your peers in the concert pianist stage? Do you know a lot of them?
That's a good. So I don't know Volodos. To answer the rest of your question, the thing about piano I found is that it's probably the most independent solo of instruments that there is, right? Like there's like 3 types of piano related concerts that you do. You might do a solo recital where you're by yourself. Or you'll do a concerto with an orchestra. So you're the soloist with an orchestra. And oftentimes, you know, you just fly in or something. You'll rehearse a couple times, but you don't really get to know the 100 people you're playing with. And then there's like chamber music stuff where you're playing with maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 other people. And you might get to know them a little bit better. But, you know, oftentimes, you know, it's such a solo independent instrument. You practice most of the time by yourself and you travel a lot of the time by yourself that, you know, I knew a lot of people, or I met a lot of people, you know, when I was in at NEC and at Juilliard, because, you know, you're interacting with musicians and stuff all the time. But, you know, after that, I think a lot of pianists who are, you know, career pianists, they travel and perform so much alone that you don't necessarily run into people unless it's for a festival where everyone's at one place at one time or something like that. Yeah.
Now, who are your top? Do you know Lang Lang? You replaced him in one concert, but did you ever get to?
No, I've never met him.
Okay.
Never met him. I'd like to.
Who are your top 3 classical pianists, like performers, concert pianists? And they could be from history, anything.
I'll give you some really the present day ones. I really love Murray Pariah's playing. Emanuel Axe, Russell Sherman. My former teacher, Miss Pyan's husband, is a concert pianist who's phenomenal. Yeah, those are some present day.
Axe, when you got the Avery Fisher Career Grant, he was part of the executive committee, right?
I think so. I think he's part of it. You never meet directly the executive. Like you don't know you're in the running for that until you pick. But I'm very lucky. I know Emmanuel Axe, and he's such a kind, wonderful person. He's great.
Now we kind of ran out of time, and it's just so fun to talk to you, Charlie. You're really a raconteur, so to speak. You know, I'm very much interested in classical improvisation, and sure. I think you do it so well. And can you give advice? If you could encourage it in the world, and because a lot of pianists, they learn their pieces, they play them, but I'd love if more people were like you, who could be creative, write their own cadenzas, improvise entire pieces on the spot. Can you maybe give some advice so that we can encourage more people like you, more people who do these things, and what advice can you give in that direction?
I mean, I think improvisation is really it's really important. It's kind of like, like if music is like a coin or something, one side of the coin of music is playing things that other people have written and putting your own stamp on them, your own interpretation. But the other side is making up your own stuff. And I think if you don't, I think it's really important to make your own stuff, because you can not only put your own interpretation on your own stuff, but you can also, you can also just create. It's like it's like boundless creativity, right? Like you can do anything you want. Whereas, when you're playing another person's work, you can put an interpretation, but it's limited within the scope of like the notes and, that they wrote and things. But on the other end, you can not only change the interpretation, but you can change the notes and the structure and the feel and in a much bigger way than maybe you can with someone else's piece, right? You don't play nobody ever puts an interpretation on the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata that makes people want to get up and start dancing. You know what I mean? Like doing a jig. No. But you can do anything you want when you're making your own stuff. And I think I think one of the best ways of practicing improvisation is just by doing it.
Okay, so like a kid who admires you, he says, man, Charlie Albright's great. I love that he can improvise. How can I do it, Charlie? Show me the way.
I think there's a few ways that I think can help. Number one, you got to just throw out inhibitions that it's going to sound like crap, right? Like at first, it probably will not sound good. If you've never improvised before, it probably won't sound great. But you can, I think almost anyone can sit down and say, okay, I want to play a C major chord in the left hand. Most people who play the piano can get to that point. And I'm going to do a little melody in the right. Let's see if that can sound good. And you'll do that for a while and it'll sound lousy, but it's something. And then you say, okay, well, then maybe I'll add another chord. Well, what chord from C sounds good? Well, I can go to an F major. That sounds okay. Or a G major, or, do something. And then, make a little melody with that and then go back and forth. You can kind of build off of it. Or if it sounds really bad, then, I can't go from this to this weird looking chord. So I won't do that again because it doesn't sound good, right? And I think that's a good way to kind of build. Another way is to basically make your own versions of songs that have already been written, but you don't have the scores to. So like, if you like the new Aladdin movie that came out and, you want to sing, you like the I Can Show You the World song, right? Well, you know how the melody goes. So try picking it out with your right hand on the keyboard, right? Okay. So once you can get the melody down, well, what chord goes good with that? Oh, this one sounds good. And then how do I make it now sound like I'm not just playing blocks? Well, what if I break up the right hand a little bit and break that chord up, right? And you can kind of go on and on. And I think each time you do that and you find something that works, that's another Lego in your box that you can and the more you practice it and stuff, the more easily you can just say when you're composing something or improvising something, I need that red Lego. I need that one thing there and I can just stick it on and it'll work. And it becomes intuitive kind of.
Excellent advice. Fantastic advice. Charlie, do you have some projects you want to plug for the rest of the second half of the year?
Let me think. Let's see. I just finished a whole bunch of concerts and I have a few weeks now. That next month, I think I'm going to be in Newport, Rhode Island. So I'm going to be playing some chamber music and a solo concert. And I'm also heading over to China. I'm going to be in Qingdao, which I think is where they make Qingdao beer also. So for all you beer lovers out there. And they're starting this big international music festival, the Qingdao Ocean Music Festival. And so they asked me to come and perform with the orchestra in their opening concert, which should be a lot of fun. And those are some upcoming nearby things, but I think most of the rest of them's on my website.
Can they go to your website and follow you on social media and you'll have all the updates?
Absolutely, yeah. So my website's just charliealbright.com, and I have Facebook.com/ I think it's Charlie Albright Pianist, and I'm really pushing now. I'm trying to do more and more with YouTube. And I'm even one thing I started doing that's actually been a lot of fun because it gets me to sit down and actually practice is doing kind of live streamed practice sessions where I'll just and people will be watching and they'll ask questions and I'll answer and I'll practice and you get to hear all the wrong notes, what everyone likes to hear. And and then Instagram and all that good stuff. So, yeah.
Well, Charlie, you're such a pleasure to talk to you. You're such a great musician, and you're really a great model for people to follow. And thank you for coming on the show and talking to me. I hope you enjoyed the questions. I really loved talking to you and picking your brain. And I really hope you'll come back soon again. The great Charlie Albright,
thanks
everyone.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Nikhil.